Hey everyone, this is Marcus, Developer Relations at Edge and Node. I just built a little subgraph that uses the new feature time series and aggregations. So why did I do that? I wanted to show you how powerful it is. Anyone that wants to do compute on smart contract data and have that done in the subgraph, so anytime you send a query to that subgraph, you get more rich data coming back from that subgraph. This is the feature for you, and it's really easy to use. So next, what we're going to do is show how I went through and set up my subgraph for time series and aggregations. And we'll go step by step on how I did that. And then you guys can go out and play with it yourself. So first things first, what I did is I set a time series entity and a aggregation entity. And with these two different entities, I am getting my subgraph ready to do what I needed to do to get a lot of data, and then from there, run compute on that data. So where's all this data first coming into? It is going into my Punk bot data entity, and I'm really only concerned with the value field right here. And I'm just looking at this as a bucket. I'm bringing in all the data, and from there, I will run compute on it. Before we move on from this, this is all required, including the ID of int8 and the timestamp of timestamp type. These are required for time series and aggregations, and of course, naming this time series entity as true. Those are all the required things, and I'm looking at this as a bucket to get all my data from there to go ahead and do calculations. Now I need an aggregation entity, and I've named this Punk bot stats. I'm getting stats from all of this data, and this is how I set this up. I simply created an aggregation entity, and what intervals at which do I want to do calculations? I want to do them every hour and every day, and so I say that right there. And the source is the Punk bot data. So it's coming in from here. And let's go ahead and continue on. How did I set this up? This is int8 and it's required, and timestamp is also required. Both of these require an ID of int8 and a timestamp of timestamp. We'll get a little bit more into that setup in a bit. But I want to go to the exciting part first. What are all the calculations I can do? I can do total value. I look at the aggregate of, I use sum, and I look at value, and I get the sum right there. I look at count, and I could just use count. That's the function, total number of data points in there. First value, last value, min value, max positive value. And we're getting into a little bit of interesting type of calculations here. You might be noticing SQL right in here. And we could do a case when usage right here of this data. And you can go ahead and play around with this as much as you want. I'm just going and showing all of the different ways that this can be used. Just by using some SQL in here, we're able to do much more calculation, which is really cool. And it's just ready and waiting for anyone to get creative with all of this. And then there's also cumulative in here as well. So really quick, I'm going to run a query on this. I just created a massive query that goes through this. And also I'm able to filter timestamp greater than and less than. This is a 1 week period. I believe this was like January, the first week of January of 2024 or 2023. I forget. But essentially, I'm looking at every day where the timestamp is greater than or less than. In this week, I look at the total value, count, first value, min value. All of this is just ready and waiting for me on these days, which is really cool. So that is it running. Let's back up a little bit more in how I set this up specifically. This is a little bit more boring, but it's required getting set up for time series and aggregations. The spec version must be 1.1.0. And of course, you have to create these entities in the subgraph manifest just to define them. Nothing else was changed down here. It was just simply, that's all I wanted to do. And then in the mappings, I was looking at this data. I needed to get the value from chain. And so I said, cool, I've got the value. That's what I'm looking at to do calculations on. Let's go ahead and create a new entity here. And because this is time series and aggregations, the ID doesn't need to actually be passed in here. The ID is automatically created by GraphNode. Quick pause right here. Yes, the ID is automatically created by GraphNode, as well as timestamp is automatically created by GraphNode. So I didn't have to define either in here. I just simply need to put in whatever text I'd like to in that ID field. And as you notice, there's no timestamp defined. So GraphNode takes care of both of those. Moving on. And so you could put auto or 0 or any string in there. It's overwritten and automatically taken care of with GraphNode. And all I'm looking at is getting that value in there. So I have a data entity and I'm passing that the Punk bot data, and that is going into the punc.bot data right in there, and I have value of which I can start to run calculations. So that's all that's really required for setting up a subgraph for time series and aggregations. It's super powerful. To be able to do all of this is really, really cool within the subgraph. You don't do that in the smart contract, of course, because that would be too expensive. And for further reading, what I'd recommend everyone to do is look at this graph tooling, examples, aggregations, subgraph. This is another subgraph that was built for the specifics of education and making sure everyone knows how to use a subgraph and use it with aggregations. And there's nice comments in here, which I appreciate. Whichever team member built this, I really appreciate that, to have that subgraph in there and for learning. And then also go into graph node docs aggregations.md. This is the README file for time series and aggregations to continue learning about this feature. Now, once again, this feature is experimental, so expect changes. However, I recommend anyone out there who is building with subgraphs to learn this skill. This is a great skill to learn, to provide to your team, to say, hey, we can do calculations on a lot of blockchain data really quickly within the subgraph itself. So once again, my name is Marcus, DevRel at Edge and Node. Have a good rest of your day, everyone. Take care.